what are defense mechanisms? Um, it's exactly as the name suggests. They are essentially a defense strategy, which are set up by your mind to protect you from any distressing information of any kind. The best analogy or best example I can compare this to is your body's immune system. The way you have a physical immune system, a biological immune system that protects your body from intruders and protects your body from any sort of distress, whether it is created by your body itself or whether it is external, it is an external threat. Your immune system tends to react in the same way, and it tends to protect you. And I think defense mechanisms are very similar to an immune system designed by your mind, by your ego, to protect you from any sort of distressing sensory or any other sort of information that can be a threat to your psyche. And information in this sense means that it's not necessarily information coming just from the outside. It's also information that can be coming from your own mind. It can also be internal, like I said, and also external stimuli. If you know how the immune system works, you know that uh, there can be threats from your body as well as from the outside. And when your body starts malfunctioning, when your immune system starts malfunctioning or functions in a very unhealthy manner, then it's called an autoimmune disorder. Diseases such as thyroid, for example, or Hashimoto's. I don't know if you know about Hashimoto's thyroid, rheumatoid arthritis. These are all diseases where your immune system attacks your cells. So it kind of turns unhealthy. Something like this happens with the defense mechanisms as well. So the defense mechanisms are a good thing, but provided they remain within the healthy boundaries of the mind. The minute they start malfunctioning and they start getting out of hand, that's where you have a problem. It's kind of like very similar to an autoimmune disorder, but this is created by the mind. So what are examples of stimuli? So for example, distressing need to harm somebody, which rises from the id. We've talked a lot about the id, the superego and the ego. But for those of you who are new and who are not familiar with Freud's model of the mind, the id is essentially what you're born with. It's the part of the mind that you're born with. It's the most primitive, most raw, most primal part of your mind that you inherit through generations, and it has all the information that is required for you to survive in the first few months of your life. For example, it has the drive to remain clean, it has the drive to remain satisfied, it has the drive to make sure you get food on time. Everything that you need to survive as a baby is already there in the id, and the id also has desires which are not acceptable for a mature adult. So a child, often you'll see a child who's not mature strike out at somebody that they don't like, and that is coming from essentially the id, because children's ego and superego is not as developed as an adult. So the id has information, it has needs, it has wants, it has desires which are not acceptable to express in day-to-day life in society. Now any need coming from the id which is not acceptable is intercepted by the ego, and the ego kind of holds it back, and the superego draws it even further and gives you information about, okay, this is not correct to do outside. That's where defense mechanisms come in from the ego to kind of act like a bridge between the superego and the id. So if the id has a need to harm somebody, the defense mechanisms step in. So this is stimuli coming from the inside. This is your own id that is creating this distressing information. And then aside from that, there can also be external stimuli. For example, a piece of bad news that you suddenly got and it shocks your system. That is an example of external stimuli which is coming from the outside, which can be disturbing. And like I said, defense mechanisms are meant to protect you from both sorts of stimuli, internal and external. Now, we all use defense mechanisms. Like I said, even healthy and functioning people have a variety of defense mechanisms at their disposal. Now, the problem arises when these defense mechanisms become unhealthy. Like I said, when you have a healthy functioning immune system, it's essential, it's something that you need, it's something that keeps you alive, keeps you safe. The minute the immune system starts attacking your own cells, it starts attacking your own body, that's when you've got a problem. and you develop autoimmune disorders. So the defense mechanisms can become unhealthy in that sense, and they can also make you actually develop mental health problems. Now, if you Google defense mechanisms on Wikipedia and you read about it, one of the statements that I read was that Wikipedia says that defense mechanisms are psychological strategies brought by the unconscious mind to manipulate, deny, or distort reality. Okay, there is some problem with the internet now. It's okay. Yeah. And I'll tell you why. If you remember Freud's model of the mind, the ego acts as a bridge between the superego and the id. So the id has this need, it has this want that arises, and the superego says, you can't act on this need, you can't do this because it's not acceptable to me or to society. And that's when the ego steps in and kind of says, okay, you know what, we need to come to some sort of understanding about, how we handle the situation. Now, what happens is that most defense mechanisms are thought to be functions of the ego. This was, in fact, hypothesized by Freud's own daughter, Anna Freud, who did a lot of work on the ego and the defense mechanisms. She's written a lot about the defense mechanisms, and she believed that the defense mechanisms actually arise from the ego. Now, if they are functions of the ego, as she said, then they cannot be 100% unconscious, because the ego is not 100% unconscious. The ego is partly unconscious and partly subconscious, meaning that some aspects of it are available for the conscious mind. So I'm not very good at computers, but I think that this is probably the best example that I could think of with my limited knowledge in computers, is that imagine that you have a hard drive, or you have a computer that has a RAM and a drive, a memory drive and everything containing all your data. This computer allows you to access some parts of it and tamper it and change it. However, other parts of it which are crucial to its existence are not really touchable by you as a layperson, or even anyone else. I mean, nowadays they say that computers are so sophisticated that once you have certain memory within the computer, it cannot ever be destroyed. It's always going to be there. It may or may not be accessible, but the data that has essentially been processed by that particular machinery is always going to remain in that. That's how black boxes in planes work, for example. Like they say, even after so much destruction, the memory essentially never goes away. It's just that it's not, we don't have the tools to access that memory yet. So we don't have the sophisticated technology, but essentially it's there. So this is something similar to what happens with the ego. So in both computers and the human mind, memories is one aspect that is untouchable and touchable. You recall a memory, you play with a memory, you toss it around in your mind. You may even recall it multiple times a day, or you may try to even just block it completely if it's a disturbing memory. The one thing you cannot do is change the memory or delete it by choice. So unless you have a delusional mind, or you have a mind which is so disturbed that memories are falsely created, or memories are deleted, for example, when you have an accident and you have memory loss, it's not something you can consciously choose to do. It's something that can happen as a result of malfunctioning in the mind as a biological reason. So you have an accident, or as a malfunctioning of neurons, but it's not something that you as a person consciously can decide to do, that, okay, today I'm going to change this memory or I'm going to delete it. It's not something that is possible. So this is what the ego functions like. It's similar to that hard drive that allows you to change some things, access some things, play around with some things, but there are some parts of it which are completely untouchable. You won't be able to do anything about it. You cannot even access that part of it. You cannot even imagine what that part is. It's just very instinctual. It's there, you know it. It's within your within your remote awareness, but it's not something that you can necessarily access at any time you want. So what happens is that I think that because the defense mechanisms are a part of the ego, and the ego itself is like this hard drive that is partly accessible and partly not accessible, that is why I feel that defense mechanisms also are partly conscious and partly unconscious. So they're not completely out of your awareness. You are aware many a times of what defense mechanism you're using. So this statement in Wikipedia was a little bit distressing for me because I think it's wrong. And a psychologist who's not trained, or who doesn't have adequate experience with defense mechanisms might not pick up on it, or a teacher might pick up and teach that particular statement to a student saying that, okay, it's from the unconscious. But I don't completely agree, because the way I've been taught defense mechanisms is that defense mechanisms can be very conscious also, and you can be very aware of them also, specifically in the case of borderline personality disorder. If you see a manipulative person like a narcissistic personality disorder, they are very much aware of what personality disorders they have, what maladaptive behaviors they have, what maladaptive defense mechanisms they have. But they continue to repeatedly use those defense mechanisms, partly because they can't help it, but partly also because they learn that it helps. They learn that it is something that has worked for them all these years. So it's a picked up behavior also of sorts. And you'll see that this is what Anna Freud actually meant when she said that it is coming from the ego.